It is the job of the government to govern, and it's the job of the media to watch them like hawks. But just as trust in government is at near historic lows, trust in media is hardly better. A new documentary, All Governments Lie, premiered at this year's Toronto International Film Festival and calls out the mainstream media for not doing their jobs. Joining us now for more, Fred Peabody. He is director of the film All Governments Lie, Truth, Deception, and the Spirit of I.F. Stone. Amy Goodman is here, executive producer and host of Democracy Now!, and Jeff Cohen, director of the Park Center for Independent Media at Ithaca College in New York and the founder of the media watchdog Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, FAIR for short. Great to have you three around our table here. It's so nice to see you again. We met a few months ago. Yes, indeed. Why don't we start by showing a clip of your documentary, and that will set the table for the discussion to come. Mr. Director, roll it, please.
I'm amused at people who claim that the governments don't lie. Really? You know human beings that never lie? Of course they lie!
I tried to prove what I was saying from the horse's mouth, as it were, using the government's own documents.
I can draw a line from I.F. Stone directly to what I'm doing now.
I thought, how could the President of the United States be involved in something this dumb at the beginning?
We're being dumbed down, we're being watered down, and we're being told information which is false.
Fred, let's start with you. What compelled you to make this film?
Well, I used to subscribe to a little newsletter, which you have in front of you there, and I was happy to hear that you subscribed to it too. I was about 19 at the time. You were probably a fetus.
It's a little older than that.
It's a 4-page weekly that the late, great I.F. Stone published out of his house with a lot of help from his wife. And I.F. Stone should be a famous name in journalism in Canada, in the U.S., worldwide, but he isn't. He is well known to many investigative journalists who've been inspired by him. But I became kind of interested in reading some more of I.F. Stone's weekly, decades after I had subscribed to it. He stopped doing it in 1971. And it was, at the time, it was one of the few places, as you know, where you could find out the truth about what the U.S. government was really doing in Vietnam and some of the hypocrisies of the U.S. State Department's policies at the time. I think that when I started catching up on I.F. Stone a few years ago, I realized that there's a documentary that should be done, not only to tell a whole new generation about the values, the journalistic values and the human values of I.F. Stone, but also some of those who are following in his footsteps today, like Amy Goodman.
We will get to Amy in a second. What do you think made him great?
He didn't accept the official line as it was coming out. To me, there's an excuse that you hear sometimes from mainstream journalists. They say, well, journalism's just the first rough draft of history. And it's sometimes an excuse for accepting things out of the government's mouths that are clearly wrong, like what happened during the run-up to the invasion of Iraq. And Izzy, within a week, he didn't wait years before deciding that I better take a look at whether the government was lying to the public. He was on it that week, and you could read the weekly and see what the government had said that wasn't truthful that very week. And so that's the essence of I.F. Stone. And a bunch of academics and leading journalists got together at the end of the 20th century, brought together by the New York University Journalism School, and they voted on the 100 greatest achievements of journalism in U.S. history during the 20th century. And they voted I.F. Stone, I think, number 16. And an achievement of one individual, helped by his wife, putting out a weekly newsletter, no editor above saying, Izzy, you can't say that. So it was I think it was his boldness, it was his experience. He had a long career in mainstream journalism before he went out on his own. And he felt, I can do better by not being invited to the White House, by not being invited to the State Department's, Secretary of State's dinners. I could do better as an outsider, as an independent. And he was seen across the country as, wow, he's like my Washington bureau chief, my personal Washington bureau chief.
How did he influence you as a journalist?
Well, the same motto that is the title of this film. All governments lie. And that's what all journalists have to remember. If journalism is the first draft of history, it can't just be State Department or White House press releases. And so often it is media journalists as stenographers to power. And so it's our job to go out every day and go to where the silence is, go to what isn't scripted, to see what's happening with our own eyes. And that is something that the corporate media has failed miserably on, especially when it comes to war. Because when the media repeats the lies of governments, whatever their party, the lies take lives. And we see that over and over again, as Jeff just pointed out and is really well illustrated in the film, the lead up to the invasion of Iraq.
Well, Dick Cheney was quoting the New York Times, which was reporting leaks from Dick Cheney.
That's right.
on where to go.
And you had Colin Powell, February 5th, 2003, giving this major address at the United Nations that he has later called a blot on his career. Where, I mean, he had great credibility. He was a general, the Secretary of State, because he had been dragging his feet on the war. So for him to give that speech that was the final nail in the coffin for so many, making the case for war. So that's the government. But the 4 major nightly newscasts, I mean, Jeff can talk about the study FAIR did. 2 weeks around that period, there were something like 393 interviews done around war when half the population was opposed, half for. In fact, 393 interviews, only 3 were with anti-war leaders. That's no longer a mainstream media. That's an extreme media beating the drums for war.
I appreciate that all governments lie. I think we all know that. The question is, do all governments lie all the time? What do you think of that?
No, I don't think that they lie all the time.
So we do have to understand that there is some truth that comes out, and we need to be able to distinguish what's truth from fiction.
Right. We have to be independent. We cannot be a party to the parties. We have to be there as the fourth estate, not for the state.
Fred,
and we need journalists to really to keep them accountable.
Well, you've actually led me where I want to go next, because some of the journalists that you chronicle in your film, some of them have been on this program. Matt Taibbi has been on this program. You have Glenn Greenwald, Jeremy Scahill at The Intercept, David Corn, Mother Jones. Why focus on them?
Well, we wanted to look at, we asked ourselves really, who are the I.F. Stones, the Izzy Stones of today? And one good gauge of that is there is an award given out called the Izzy Award. It's given out by Ithaca College under the direction of Jeff Cohen. And we started by looking at, and it's given to journalists who are carrying on the tradition, following in the footsteps of I.F. Stone. Amy, of course, has won it. Jeremy Scahill has won it.
Glenn Greenwald, David Corn, Naomi Klein.
Yeah, who we tried to get, but she was ridiculously busy.
She's pretty busy.
John Carlos Frey, who's done all this reporting on the U.S.-Mexico border. He won the award one year.
Have there been any journalists from the main American television networks or CNN or MSNBC, any of those journalists that you think are in this category?
Very few. The problem is, the beauty of I.F. Stone and the beauty of Amy Goodman and the new generation of I.F. Stones is that they just have this sense of independence from the powers that be. And, they know that you have to sometimes stick it to the man, or question authority, don't believe the establishment. If you work for the mainstream media in the U.S. today, you're working for the man. It's very hard to navigate that. I worked in cable news for a number of years. But so who are the I.F. Stones that work on the inside? They're usually people that are almost on their way out. I mean, one of the great investigative writers in the country today in the U.S. is James Risen at the New York Times, and he has to sometimes publish his best work in books because they somehow couldn't make it into the New York Times.
They wouldn't publish some of his stuff.
Right.
That's right.
And Chris Hedges, who's in our documentary.
Chris, yes, who's been on this program too.
An accomplished reporter for the New York Times. But
In fact, it was, Edward Snowden decided not to go to the Times precisely because of how they had suppressed Risen's information. He thought, I can't trust they're actually going to follow through on this. I have to go to people who are serious. And so other people featured in the film, Laura Poitras and Glenn Greenwald.
Is this an American phenomenon, what you're describing here? Journalists being in the tank too much for the people they cover?
No, but I think that American journalism is extremely powerful in shaping the narrative all over the world. I mean, because the U.S. invades Iraq, it's not just about the U.S., so it really matters. I think you have this problem everywhere. People, journalists being stenographers to their own powers that be. And we all have to be independent.
But if you're an anchor for a big American television program and you get invited, let's say, to the White House for one of those dinners, do you really think you can be bought for that?
No one is saying that because you had dinner at the White House. I mean, you could be finding out a lot of things there that you're compromised. The question is what you do on your broadcast, what your journalism is all about. And all too often, the networks fail us. Look at the 2016 presidential election. I can't single out CNN or Fox or MSNBC in the United States. Donald Trump sounds the same on all three networks. It's all Trump TV. That is unacceptable.
Well, having said that, I'm going to pull a bit of an audible here, guys. Can we go further ahead here? Can we go to chapter 3? Because you bring this up here, talking about Donald Trump. Can we do these images from CNN? Because they've started doing something that I have never seen anybody ever do before. How CNN's, these captions at the bottom, they're called chyrons in the business, as you guys know. Trump calls Obama founder of ISIS. In brackets, he's not. How about the next one? Trump, I never said Japan should have nukes. In brackets, he did. Next one, Trump's son, father apologized to cons. In brackets, he hasn't.
Yeah.
This is new and different. Do we like this?
Oh, yeah, of course. I just think you're picking out the exceptions to the rule, that this happens once in a while. It should happen every day. And it shouldn't just happen to Trump. It should happen with Hillary Clinton and all people that are in power or aspire to power. But yeah, that's great journalism.
Don't you think it's a reflection of the fact that the establishment has turned against Donald Trump? So the establishment thinks it's okay to attack Donald Trump, and the gigantic corporations that own the major networks in the States take their lead from the establishment.
You could give the example. You could say, the New York Times may have gotten it wrong in Iraq and weapons of mass destruction, but they apologized. That is not enough. When you look at the drumbeat coverage on the front page of the papers making these allegations based on unnamed sources, and then eventually on page A10, they have their, what many called their mea culpa, I called their kinda culpa, where they just laid out without naming any names, okay, maybe we got it kinda wrong. You need to call out not only Michael Gordon and Judy Miller, the editors, all the people involved with this terrible propaganda. But you have to put it on the front page of that paper as many times as those articles appeared. Because what sinks into the consciousness of people is the daily, whether it's a television newscast, what's on top of the news, what's on the front page of the paper, and that's where these corrections have to be. Or maybe not make the mistake so you don't have to put in those corrections.
But Fred, do you have, I know there are some examples in the film, and the one we showed right off the top there about Cenk Uygur going to MSNBC and lasting about 6 months there until they canceled the show because he was, in their view, too outrageous, I guess.
Too anti-establishment.
Too anti-establishment.
Having the audacity to criticize President Obama. That was his transgression.
That's about the one example I've seen, which is crystal clear, of somebody from corporate America coming to a journalist and saying, you got to tone that down. That normally doesn't happen, does it?
Yeah. Let me go.
Because they don't usually hire guys like Cenk Uygur. They thought they were getting somebody that I guess they didn't know what they were getting. But as he says,
I think you're right. It doesn't happen a lot. But when it happens, everyone inside the mainstream media knows it happened. And it's the shot fired, and heard all over the world. But I was at MSNBC.
You got the Phil Donahue example.
Yes, that's another one where it was, does that happen every day? No.
You should just explain what that was.
All right. I was a senior producer on the Phil Donahue show. We were one of the
this is the reincarnation
primetime show on MSNBC. And we were one of the only places trying to put voices on the air of real experts, like real weapons of mass destruction experts. And every time we did, we got complaints from management, You know, we were putting on people like Scott Ritter, who was saying they really don't have weapons of mass destruction anymore.
And he was UN weapons
inspector. Right. So so in the last few months, as we got closer and closer to the invasion of Iraq, management took over our show. And they dictated to us who could get on and who couldn't. And they said to us, if we had a guest who was anti-war, we had to have 2 that were pro the upcoming invasion. If we had 2 guests on the left, we had to have 3 on the right. At one meeting, a producer said, I think I could book Michael Moore for Thursday. And she was told for political balance, she'd have to have 3 right-wingers. And, you know, so I privately thought about, you know, recommending Noam Chomsky as a guest, but our stage, you know, couldn't accommodate the 18.
On the other side.
Yeah. So, but I mean, again, did that happen all the time? I wrote a book about my experiences in mainstream cable TV news. And when that book came out, I heard from dozens of journalists, local media, regional media, national media, who also were sanctioned, censored, lost their jobs because they were trying to be journalists in a time of war. We all know about DWI, you know, driving while under the influence. We have a crime in the U.S. called JWI, that's doing journalism while independent during wartime. It's not allowed. It wasn't allowed during the beating of the drums for Syria. So I don't think the New York Times has learned a lesson from the invasion of Iraq. They still quote the same think tanks, the same experts, still use too many unnamed sources.
But I want to pick your brains on this, Amy, because, you know, when journalists do what they do, they of course want to be able to, well, I should say, I presume of course they want to tell the truth, but they also want to ingratiate themselves enough with high-ranking sources in order to get information that other people don't get. And we understand that. How do you make sure that you really stick to that balance properly?
I call that the access of evil. Not to be confused with access of evil. Okay, that is journalists trading truth. That is that is trading truth for access. It's not worth it. We have to be there on the ground. You know, politicians need journalists more than journalists need politicians. We have to be there digging. I just recently came from North Dakota, where Native Americans are challenging, and it's something you know well in the in Canada. Native Americans are challenging yet another pipeline being built. This is called the Dakota Access Pipeline, $3.8 billion pipeline. Only Democracy Now! Was there on the ground on Labor Day weekend, September 3rd, when the Native elders, children, men and women went up to plant their tribal flags on an excavation site that they didn't think would be active. It was a weekend.
No other media?
No. And we were there. The Native Americans came up on the site. Bulldozers were going full speed. They were wrecking their tribal, ancient, sacred burial grounds. And the security came at them, beat them, tackled them, pepper sprayed them, and unleashed dogs on them that bit the Native Americans. We have images of dogs with blood coming out of their mouth and their noses. Now, no one else had this. We raced off at the end of this horrific encounter. Put that video online. We're at the point, it's something like 14 million hits online on Facebook and continuing to grow. All of the networks then took the video, but why weren't they there? These encampments, now at over 1,000 Native Americans, have been set up since April. This is like the Keystone XL. But so often when you have people who are from populations not deemed worthy, elite enough by the mainstream media, they simply don't cover these actions when it's movements that matter. That is our job, to cover the movements that make history.
By any definition, what you just described, by any definition, that's news. Why would no other newscasters be there?
Well, now perhaps they are telling the story, because when this video came out, we got calls from every one of the networks saying, can we run this video? But they've got to go there.
They don't have the sources. I mean, their sources are in these suites. They've got elite sources.
They've got the resources, but not the sources.
Right. Amy's got the sources among activist groups trying to change the country and change the world. I think the good news, and what the movie shows, is that independent media are growing and that people are hungry for this kind of in-depth news that they're not getting from corporate mainstream media. It's why Democracy Now! Is growing.
And you know why Bernie Sanders was such a shock to the corporate media? He didn't create a movement. He rode the movements that have been percolating all over our country. And that kind of coverage of movements, it was not shocking then when someone like Bernie Sanders, who saw this issue of inequality being the key issue of our day, look at Occupy, that the media poo-pooed, ridiculed, hardly covered at the beginning, then was ultimately forced to. This is why movements matter. Ultimately, they make all of the difference.
Now, you've worked at some pretty good TV shows in the past. We talked about Take 30 on CBC, Fifth Estate, maybe the granddaddy of all the investigative shows in Canadian media history, journalistic history. We all came up the same way with this kind of neutral, objective, not first-person style of trying to tell stories. And I think most of us still worship at that altar. Are you saying that's not the way to go?
Perhaps the scales have fallen from my eyes. I don't know. But yes, when you're working within the system. I mean, I even had the audacity to go and work for the American mainstream media for 2020, and you don't, when you're inside the machine, you don't really see how it is controlled by corporate interests and elites, government elites and corporate elites, and you're trying to do the best you can. And 2020, when I was there, which was years ago, had some outstanding producers like Danny Schechter, who I basically replaced, and he was an outstanding progressive producer. The whole picture has changed in the U.S.
But again, you just said progressive.
Yeah.
The way I was taught, the news isn't conservative or progressive or liberal or reactionary, whatever. It's just straight ahead.
Yeah.
But you're saying something else.
Sometimes, as Jeremy Scahill of The Intercept says in our film, sometimes the truth is just true. And I wasn't taught that way. Although the climate at CBC News, especially when I was there 20 years ago, and at the Fifth Estate, I think was a more liberating climate for telling the truth, for doing stories about injustice. You know, my eyes were opened a little bit when I moved down to the States, and was now working for a more ratings-driven program and network.
But Jeff, are you saying that the way that journalists interpret the news now ought to be done through a quote-unquote progressive lens?
I'm saying that the mainstream looks at things through the corporate lens. There's no doubt about it. They look at things through the establishment lens. They look at things through the Democratic and Republican Party lens, and well, let me put myself halfway in between the two and assume that there's no truth on any side. There's no doubt that there's bias in the mainstream media, and it's pronounced. And I think it gets worse. It gets more elite, more establishment. So these independent journalists, it's not that they're progressive that matters to me. What matters is they're digging up the stories that the mainstream are missing.
Right. I mean, it's not neutral to bring on a general and a colonel and say, how should we approach this war? Should we have boots on the ground, or should we simply bomb? Well, where's the not bombing at all? And by the way, there are a number of generals who are opposed to wars, and when they come to oppose a particular war, they're often just not called back on the media.
Not newsworthy anymore.
And so I rarely see that, quote, neutrality.
One of the great media philosophers in our country today is a guy named John Oliver. And he does a show on HBO called Last Week Tonight. And this whole issue of how we balance bringing people on from one side and another side, well, no one does it like John Oliver. Sheldon, roll the clip, please.
Last Week Tonight presents a statistically representative climate change debate.
Good evening. Joining me tonight, a climate change denier and, naturally, Bill Nye Science Guy.
Bill? John?
Yep.
Humans are causing climate change? No question.
Wait. Before we begin, in the interest of mathematical balance, I'm going to bring out two people who agree with you, climate skeptic, and Bill Nye, I'm also going to bring out 96 other scientists. It's a little unwieldy, but this is the only way you can actually have a representative discussion.
He's pretty funny.
He is, yeah.
Now,
investigative comedy.
Yeah, investigative
and
comedy.
that's absolutely critical. I mean, on the issue of climate change, in the United States, when you have the networks talking about climate change, it's as if every time we talked about the planet Earth, we brought on someone from the Flat Earth Society. It is ridiculous.
That's balance old school rules.
And
right?
it's wrong.
One on one side.
And it's absolutely wrong. And they don't do that. But why do they continue to raise this issue of whether or not human beings are involved in climate change? Well, let's look at what are known as, I mean, you may call them think tanks, others call them stink tanks. The oil barons who set up these think tanks that obfuscate the issue. If we had objective journalism, you wouldn't be having these debates. You would have lots of debates on climate change. What to do about it?
And Amy has a great soundbite in this documentary. You know, in America, in the United States, you have the news brought to you by the biggest military contractors in the world, brought to you by the biggest oil and gas interests in the world, brought to you by the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world.
The people who put on those shows would swear on a stack of Bibles that the fact that the advertising in between their content may be from those corporations, it doesn't affect what they do.
Right, and that's nonsense, because you just brought out how many times they've done the debates about climate change where they give half weight to the oil and gas industry funded lies alongside the scientists. It's completely influenced by those sponsors. And it's why, I mean, in this, you know, a big movement in the United States is to stop fracking, to stop extreme extraction. You can't get that on MSNBC or CNN. And the biggest, if you watch the nightly news, and I do every night, ABC, CBS, NBC, the two biggest advertisers is one, the oil and gas industry.
Big Pharma.
Right, and two, Big Pharma.
Absolutely.
And there's no doubt that those industries and other industries like them just don't get the scrutiny they deserve because of it.
Also, let's be clear. I mean, it's who they cozy around with, and also it's who's chosen to do these jobs. It's not that you get a call and say, don't do this, don't say this. It is the entire atmosphere. And I know many great journalists who go into the corporate media because they really want to make a difference and reach a large audience. And they're always assessing, am I able to do this? Because they see who rises and who doesn't. And that's the story, for example, of Cenk. Once one person is forced out, that is much more important. It's not about him, it's about the message that's sent to everyone else.
Amy, I mean, your interview with Bill Clinton during that first time he ran, I mean, is a legendary interview, and you actually asked him some questions about issues as opposed to a lot of the fluff. He didn't like that very much, incidentally, if I recall. Did you ever talk to him again?
He called me hostile, combative, and at times disrespectful because I was asking questions about the sanctions against Iraq. They killed 500,000 children, about the fact that the Assistant UN Secretary Generals, 2 of them, had quit, calling the sanctions genocidal. And then, you know, this was a call he made on Election Day simply to get out the vote. And I asked him about Ralph Nader, that he was running for president at the time. And he was getting a lot of support. And I said, President Clinton, isn't it really because of you that he's gotten so much support? Because you took the Democratic Party to the right. And that's when he got angry. And so I said, I just have a few more questions. And we kept him on the phone for a half an hour. And they were outraged, the White House.
His
I don't know why.
But I think he probably enjoyed it. He likes a good debate.
They called up the next day and they said I'd be banned from the White House. I said, wait a second, he called me. I didn't call him.
That's right. But tell me this. I mean, you've obviously covered a lot of politicians in the course of your life. Would you deny that there are some out there who get into politics for good and noble reasons and want to make a difference?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. There are wonderful people who have the public interest at heart. And it is absolutely critical they run for office.
Are there any conservatives who fit that bill in your view?
I don't see it as conservative and liberal in these cases. I see it as people who care about making a difference in the world and making the world better.
So there are some.
I think there are many.
And there are some outstanding journalists working in the mainstream media who care, and but they're only able to do so much, not because they are stood over by their managing editors and told to take lines out. They know how they're supposed to write and the stories they're supposed to do, and they're not thinking about the fact that the big structure around them is that their news organizations are owned by gigantic corporations who have a totally different interest, which is basically selling ads.
There's good news. You know, we've been talking about what's wrong with the mainstream media. This movie emphasizes good news. that independent media perhaps have never been stronger in the United States than any time in 100 years. You have Democracy Now! Just keeps growing. Cenk Uygur with the Young Turks, a web TV thing, keeps growing. The Intercept with all these resources behind it. Laura Poitras, Glenn Greenwald, Jeremy Scahill. If people now want to look for alternatives to corporate mainstream media and ratings-driven news and puppy dogs and panda births, it's now easier to find actual independent, hard-hitting news.
Yeah, but there's Alex Jones out there too, and Glenn Beck, and all of that.
There's a lot of craziness. There's no doubt about it. But there's also, thanks to the internet, thanks to new communications, independent journalists have never had a bigger forum or a bigger audience, and they can do it every day.
Which is why we also have to keep the internet open and free and not let the corporations write the legislation that would privatize this global equalizing force.
There is an irony here, though, in as much as the title of your movie is All Governments Lie, and you all at this table believe that. Actually, we all at this table believe that. Just, I'm not sure they lie all the time. Well, even you said they don't lie all the time.
And I.F. Stone said that.
And
Izzy Stone said, I don't mean they lie all the time.
But you know who has championed that message above everyone else over the last year in the American, well, not even a year, in the American election campaign? It's Donald Trump. You guys are all agreeing with Donald Trump. That's a pretty strange bedfellow, don't you think, Amy?
Well, I also live in New York, and so does Donald Trump. That doesn't, because we have that commonality. Okay. But you add to that the racist rhetoric and true sentiment of this presidential candidate. You're talking about a man who has ripped open the underbelly of hate in America. It's astoundingly dangerous and horrifying. And I think that the press has a good deal of responsibility for this. They talked about it openly, owners of the press, and it's in the documentary.
In the movie. Les Moonves from
That's
CBS.
right. Talking about go out there because you're making us money. It's unacceptable.
Right. I mean, the system in the United States really helped Trump. MSNBC and CNN more than any, and they're considered liberal media. If Trump was giving a speech, Trump was holding a news conference, he was privileged over all the candidates, and there were once 20 candidates in the race, that they would call it breaking news, and they would cut away, and he'd get 15, 20 minutes of uninterrupted coverage.
You know why? People watched. People were interested.
But people would have watched. But people would have watched Bernie Sanders, who never got that. And Bernie Sanders crowds were bigger. And Bernie Sanders, but there was a reason that Trump, when he attacks, who's wrecking America? It's Muslims, it's immigrants from south of the border. When Bernie Sanders says who's wrecking America, it's the corporations that own and sponsor the news.
I want another 3 hours for this group, but I got 2 minutes left. Amy, I wonder if you could just give us a concluding comment on how you believe low levels of trust in government and mainstream media, how that at the end of the day affects our democracy.
Well, I think the good thing right now, because I do think it's important to talk about good news, is people are seeking out news they can trust, authentic voices. And we have to be there. I see the media as a huge kitchen table that stretches across the globe, that we all sit around and debate and discuss the most important issues of the day, war and peace, life and death, and anything less than that is a disservice to a democratic society. We've got to build a new kind of media that is separate from the state, that challenges it. That's what will save us.
I guess this place would count. Does it? I don't know. This is public television, but it's funded by the province of Ontario.
Yeah,
so
I don't
does this
see
count?
I don't see the military contractors sponsoring your news show. I don't see the oil and gas industry doing it. I don't see Wall Street banks. That's a big factor.
Yeah. And I assume you're not getting calls from Queen's Park from the premier telling you what to put on your shows.
I think everybody understands. Well, listen, this sounds self-serving, but I think everybody, and I've been here more than 20 years, understands the separation of church and state.
Yeah.
They do, and we do.
Donald Trump does not. He has threatened to open up the libel laws. He's going to, if he's the president.
Ban reporters from press conferences. And says he will do the same thing at the White House.
Yeah. But he wants to be, he's not a government liar yet, but he wants to become a government liar, because that's what he'll be if he gets in.
Less than 2 months to go.
Telling lies and inaccuracies.
It's going to be an unbelievable last couple of months.
Basis.
I want to thank Fred Peabody, who is the director of All Governments Lie, Truth, Deception, and the Spirit of I.F. Stone. Izzy would be happy if he saw your picture. Yes. Amy Goodman, the executive producer and the host of Democracy Now!, Jeff Cohen, the director of the Park Center for Independent Media at Ithaca College in New York, and the founder of FAIR. Great to have all of you around our table at TVO tonight. Thank you
so much,
very
Steve.
much.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.